Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. Super grateful to have you here today. And also, big shout out to the Family Office Insights community for paying attention to what we do here and sharing it as you have. Really grateful for that. So, we're going to do something a little different. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you're going to find out if you stay tuned. So, Kate, thank you for doing this. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Arthur, I am delighted to be here. Thank you for indulging me in the opportunity to interview you. We met some time ago, maybe over the last many months, but certainly not more than a year ago, and just developed kind of a good friendship and sort of aligned on some uniqueness in terms of similarities in authors and the type of books and genre we like to read and the type of material we like to lean into. And as I've gotten to know you, I thought to myself, you know what? You are so good at interviewing other people and really diving into the brilliance in other people.
You're very
And
kind. Thank you.
I wanted to do that with you today and just
I
take some.
seek not to disappoint.
Well, I hope that this can be just an informal conversation about who you are, what has made you so successful, why you still stay in the hunt. There's a rigor to what you do. Even just this podcast with Arthur's Roundtable, there's a rigor to it. There are people behind it that you lead and manage. And so, what I would love to do is just start out with an open ended question, which is really around giving us a little bit of insight, or maybe telling your story in a way that gives us a little bit of insight into what drives you today. Tell us a little bit about that and your story.
Yeah, so I think it's really simple and maybe illustrated best by my sister asking me a question. Where are you now? You left Manhattan during COVID and you're in Colorado or something. And my sister's a super interesting, unique personality. Aside from being my sister, she's hyper talented artist. And her name's Aphrodite, which caused all kinds of problems while she was growing up, and she has blazing red hair. And so she was picked on early on because she was so talented and smart. But anyway, she asked me the question, so you're retired now? And she never had a real grasp of what I did for a living because it was not really amorphous to those of us that are in the business world and kind of the silo that I operate in, but it was anathema to her. Like what are you doing now? So anyway, she asked me if I was retiring and I said, why would I do that? Like, what's that mean? Because I'm doing pretty much exactly what I want to do. Isn't that the idea of retirement? Right. And so it is an enriching life. And I don't mean to be too crazy about saying it that way, but I get to interview people like you and speak to people like you and see amazing entrepreneurs regularly and fund managers and learn deeply about things and learn a peripheral nature about things as well. And it makes for a nice way to spend your time aside from, figuring out the game of monetizing things. I mean, it is just a game. And so it's exciting to be able to connect the dots and make things happen. And I stopped and thought about it when she asked me the question. I said, like, what's retirement? What would retirement look like for me? I could move to part of the time to Utah and buy a ranch and enjoy the nature. Well, I'm doing that already. So I don't think I need to retire to do that. Right.
Yeah.
So it didn't make any sense to me, but I got it. Totally got it why she thought maybe that to be the case. So to answer your question, it is an enormous amount of fun and it's enriching and it produces money. And I have great relationships with people and I continue to build them and it makes life really enriched.
Yeah. It's interesting how we see people through the lens of our own understanding. So she has one understanding of what retirement is supposed to be, but it's really what we're learning, I think, as we're evolving as a society, that it's not that way. There's not one definition. It's what works for Arthur, what works for you in terms of what you want to do with your time. So were you always this ambitious? Like growing up, were you always this ambitious?
Yeah. I thank you for sending along some questions because I thought about them, but not for very long. I will admit that. There was a point in my life where my father, who was unlike most Greek immigrants. He wasn't an immigrant. He was born here, but he was largely an immigrant. Would start a diner, work in a cash business, make a fair amount of money, take care of their family. And, it worked for a lot of Greek people, whether it was a grocery store or whatever. And he didn't do that. He ended up working in a paper mill that his father worked in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, where I was born, and end up being, a skilled paper maker and never owned a business, but always worked for somebody. And so the background is only to tell you that in his 50s, he got fired or let go or whatever you want to call it, not for doing anything bad, but for whatever reason. And that was the end of his career in his 50s because nobody at the time wanted to hire him. And so he lamented and suffered as a result, not financially because he was fine, but his ego was shot. Like it really cut him to the quick. And so I was young, uh, and but it really uh, ended up putting an imprint on me, saying, "Yeah, I am going to do my best to never allow somebody to take my name off the door." And so that's really what's caused me to. And I've had wild failures and miserable times in my life economically. Thankfully, just economically, not like my kids have suffered or anything like that, or family. And aside from him, he ended up, you know, putting on a lot of weight, had a stroke, and the last 25 years of his life was in a wheelchair. And it was, stress related, health related, all that kind of stuff. But he had a miserable the last 25 years of his life, and so did his wife, my mother. And so I just, I said, there's no way that's going to happen to me. And so even though I've had, you know, times where I was broke with 3 kids, it didn't matter. I was not gonna let, somebody else dictate whether I had a way of making a living or not.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That example was really powerful for you. I could see how that would drive you to want to have control over your destiny. And so many people leave control outside of themselves. And the only place that leaves us is to be at effect. If we have control, if control is with someone else, whether it's a boss or organization or anything, the only thing that we can be is at effect, a victim.
Exactly. And listen, there's nothing wrong with getting a job and taking care of your family. I'm not
Yeah.
not for me, right? And,
Yeah.
you can I told my kids that they all came out of school and worked hard and got jobs and, found their way in the world and are totally launched and doing well. But I said, one of the things I've learned is if you're going to get a job, and I use the Goldman Sachs trade. I say, you work at Goldman Sachs for 10 years, they make $300 million. You walk out with 10, but you walk out with a Rolodex that you couldn't build in any other way but on their brand. And shame on you if you don't do anything with it. So that's okay, right? In my view, this is just my view. And that's what I told him. I said, if you want to go somewhere where you can build something that when you want to go out and launch it on your own, that you have the benefit of having done it with somebody that helped you make connections that you would otherwise not be able to make.
Yeah. Such wise advice.
They didn't
That
all do that, but some version of it, right?
it should be on the graduation list of every college graduate, because we can recoup money, we can't recoup time. But that's sage advice. I love that. Let's turn to a defining moment. I have a question here that I want to ask you. Was there a single decision or moment that changed the trajectory of your life more than any other? A single moment in the course of your career?
I would say it was that thing with my father. But in terms of supporting that, I mentioned I was, had a really failed business and I was broke and had 3 kids and I had to figure out. So, it's kind of like the alcoholic, down at the bottom and there's no way but up. And so pulled myself up and figured it out. And so I think having embarked on the entrepreneurial journey and failed at it, it further, some people would say, holy shit, I'm not doing that again. But it further enhanced my willingness to say, okay, I've got to make this work. And of course, having children and, is just changes your life, as many people know.
Yeah, it does. It did for me as well. It sounds like it fortified you. Did you have people around you, Arthur, when you were going through that you could turn to for support? Did you have a support system during that time?
I had good friends that were successful entrepreneurs that said, "Just keep on going." My wife at the time was reasonably supportive and was on my side, so that was super helpful. My family, not so much so because they didn't get it, right? No, aside from that, not really.
So you were really the first one in your family to venture off as an independent, as an entrepreneur.
Really. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have 2 sisters. One is the one I mentioned, and she's, married a great guy, 2 kids, wonderful life, smart, an artist. So there's no business acumen there, but her husband's a great guy. My other sister sort of is not even close to being entrepreneur, just sort of plodded along in life. But yeah, that was the only one. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you know, neither one of my siblings, n- nor not only did they not know what I was doing, they had no idea of what I was going through. Not a single thing. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but they prospered as a result because I made money and I helped them, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. But you carried that weight. It sounds like you carried the majority of that weight on your own when you have a family and things in the business world aren't going as planned and you have to pivot. It's a lot of responsibility. And so kudos to you. When you already have I'm just gonna take a leap and say you're at a point in your life where you could do what you want when you want, and that if you decided tomorrow to go horseback riding for the rest of your days, you could do that. So when you already have more than enough, what still makes so we've touched on some of this, but what still makes you get up early, lean in? I know that you have a thirst for learning, that you love to read. What do you think is driving you at this stage?
it's different than what drove me at earlier stages, but the longevity is a reality, right? There's only 32 and a half more years left. And what am I going to do with them? Right? There's nothing I can do about that except do the things, eat well, exercise, be mindful of, you know, really be mindful of the most valuable asset, and that's your time. And so it's not just, you know, carving out the time to go to the gym because it'll help and making sure that you eat well because it's going to help. But also, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm just not going to do it. Right. I'm not interested. I'm not rude about it. But if I'm at a cocktail party and somebody starts blathering nonsense, I just move on. Right. I'd rather just go somewhere else, do something else. Right. Talk to
Yeah,
somebody else or go home and read a book. Right.
yeah,
So I think that right now, a lot of it's like, okay, and I admit I'm driven by making more money. I like the idea of making more money. And it's not just for me. My daughter said something to me that was, I can't even remember what it was, but it was, you know, what about this? And, what about, the effects of this? And it was something that we didn't agree on. And I said, I don't care about that for me. I care about it for you. Like, I'm not doing it because it's going to affect my life. It's going to affect your life. Right. So, and it's sort of a perfunctory point of view with parents is that you want to make sure your kids do well and have what they need and, have a good life. But it's true. I mean, it's not that I'm going to give the money to the kids and that's why I'm doing this is I want to, money is freedom, gives you options. Right. Like I had a estate planning lawyer that I used for one of my early estate plans. And I said, we were friendly enough that I said to him, I said, what a miserable way to make a living doing estate plans for people. And he goes, you're right. And I said, how did this all come about? And he said, well, if my parents had told me that there was some money there for me to start a business, and there was, but they didn't tell me, I would be doing something much different than this. And I had to do this because I didn't know I had an option. So
Wow.
he was lamenting that had he known that he could launch a business, even if it was failed, it would have been a great education process. He was lamenting that he wished they had made a different decision when the time is right. Because one of my kids launched a business and they're wildly successful. Actually, both, two of them. One of them I helped finance, one of them I didn't. So I want to give them those options, you know, so they can create. I have a friend of mine that wrote a book, and it's about people who have money don't realize that they worry about things that at that stage in their life, at certain stages in their life, that maybe they ought to not worry about anymore and think about living their best life. Like, okay, you've got 30 million bucks, enjoy it, right? Don't worry about all the stuff that you worried about while you were making the $30 million because you're at a different point. So that's what I hope to give them is that optionality.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you're passing on so much more than just the option and the opportunity, or you're passing on is the mindset. And it's just like the individual, let's use 30 million as an example. Someone who has a net worth of $30 million might still be thinking about the fear that they had when they were just starting out. Even though the numbers are vastly different, it's the conditioning that happens during those times when where life is heavy, and that heaviness can stay with us if we're not aware of it. So another thing that you're passing on is just a beautiful mindset of this idea of freedom. And yes, money gives you options. It's not the answer for everything, but it definitely gives you
Definitely gives you options. Yeah.
options. Yeah. I think that's one thing we have in common: money motivated and mission driven.
But listen, there there's often an axiom saying people say, well, it's not about the money. Well, when someone says it's not about the money, it is about the money, right? And when someone says, I don't think about it in terms of money, it's true. It's because you have money. When you don't have money, it's a completely different construct, right? It's easy to say it's not about the money when you have it. So, when some rich people say, it's not about the money, I'm not buying it most of the time.
Yeah, it is a shift in perception for sure. Let's turn to beliefs. I want to hear a little bit about your beliefs around the world. What are the beliefs that you hold in terms of where we are in the world? Maybe something that might be a little bit more, not necessarily aspirational, but visionary. So, where we are in the world now, beliefs that you hold that most people don't see yet. So, I know you have a strong intuition, and I know that you're a visionary. What are some beliefs
Let's
that you
not
have?
get carried away. Yeah. Um, so I'm dyed in the wool an American. I think this is the best country in the world, and I've been to many others. And I think that people who haven't traveled have a disadvantage because it doesn't take long when you travel to other parts of the world to see how much different this is. I mean, it's immediately obvious and depending on where you go. So I think that 250-year experiment, while it's not perfect, is pretty darn good. And I think that it's like what I think it was Alexis de Tocqueville said, capitalism is the worst construct of them except for all the others, right? Something like that. So it's not perfect. And we have the thing that we have here that is much different than other parts of the world that I've not only been to, but done business in is that graft is a way of life in other parts of the world. And rule of law doesn't really come into play in many parts of the world. And so we have a huge advantage here, not only that we have a large population, but we have rule of law that's not perfect, but you can count on it on some level. And other parts of the world just depends on who you pay off.
Mm,
Mm. And that, you know, everybody talks about leveling the playing field. That playing field in other parts of the world is nowhere near level, right? Because if you don't have the right people, and it's true here about right people, connections, and money, but you're so far, there's no way to get out of misery in some of those other parts of the world. At least there's the opportunity to do that. So I think that I mean, aside from that overreaching view that I think we're so lucky that I think we're on some sort of trajectory to keep it that way. Not to get political about it, but I think that we dodged a big bullet. Had the current administration in whatever form it would have been in, would have been, would have been a complete disaster. It may not been a recoverable event, but I mean, that's just my opinion. And it's opinion that's I've dug, I've read a lot, right? I've dug really deep on what really is going on behind the scenes, and it's ugly, right? Even in this administration, it's ugly, but it can get really out of control. Uh, had it, we continue to allow the cycle of money to go. And, just a good example is, all the contributions to political campaigns is just, and many times money laundering that just loops back around and funds the person that you're supporting in the campaign because they arrange for you to get that money through nefarious means. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is the way the world works in large part. And so I think a lot of that can be thwarted and still maintain a safety net for people. And so we went down the political thing. But it was not your fault, my fault.
It's okay.
Yeah.
No, I understand what you're saying, though. It is, we're in a time, we live in a time when we have to do our own due diligence,
And
our
we
own thinking.
can't believe anybody.
Yeah, to be independent thinkers. I think one of the things I love studying Napoleon Hill, and one of the things he always talked about was being an independent thinker. Even raising my son, teaching him not what to think, but how to be an independent thinker, how to get curious, how to politely challenge points of view where maybe something didn't sit right. Because we all, like I said before, we all come from our own worldview, what we think is right,
Our
what we,
life experiences, our worldview. And
yeah,
I think what you're talking about is the lack of teaching critical thinking, because that's really what matters is, okay, if you say it's that way, explain to me why. And Kate, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I give a lot of people a pass because if you're busy working 9 to 5 job, picking up Johnny and going to soccer, making sure dinner's on the table, getting up next morning and doing it all over again, you don't have time to dive deep into things that may warrant that. And so oftentimes people will attach themselves to an ideology that supports what they think is the right thing, but often has no basis in them doing the critical thinking to support that. It just echoes what they think is true, right? And
yeah,
so, and I don't blame them because we only have so much time, right? But that
yeah,
is the case when somebody's in a situation where they're captured by some ideology. It's just a lot easier to go along with it if it feels good, right?
yeah, yeah. Either if it feels good or if it taps into fear. People are driven by
Good
fear
point.
as well.
Yeah, totally.
Mm. So the fear of something happening or not happening, it's real. And you're right. It's very palpable. I kind of miss the days when you could watch the news and it was just the reporting of the news. And then you got to think for yourself whether it was good or bad.
I think that's gone.
It wasn't the drama and sensationalism that there is now. No spin.
No, it is a natural outgrowth of capitalism, which is bad, right? So we have good things and bad things, right? Free markets, pretty good model. Capitalism, pretty good model. Socialism, some people would argue. I'd say, we all know it's failed. Communism, of course, has its. And so what's happened, it's really simple if you pay attention, is that the narrative on the network news, let's say all of it, is based on who's paying the bills. If you just follow the money, why do pharmaceutical companies advertise all these drugs on TV? It's not because they hope that you're going to go to your doctor and ask for that drug. That's the farthest thing from their mind. What they're doing is paying off the network by advertising so they don't do an expose about how bad the drug is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is not rocket science to figure out, but most people aren't going to connect those dots.
No, they don't have this is not in their scope to even think like that. I heard today that one of the Super Bowl ads is from a pharmaceutical company. And I think it's probably the GLP-1, the weight
A hot,
loss.
hot item.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. But interesting that they have an ad. I think that ads are 8 million for 30 seconds or something like that. So it'd be interesting to see what that looks like. Um, but I want to turn our conversation really to legacy and meaning, because I think this you've touched on a lot of this, um, your journey as an entrepreneur and the resilience that it takes to get through those times when, you had young kids and things weren't going as you had hoped, but really picking yourself up and moving yourself through that to be able to create the life that you have today, which is really, really powerful. So my question is this, it's if the businesses disappeared tomorrow and only your impact on people remained, what would you hope that they would say about you?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. Super uncomfortable. Yeah, I don't mean to be like mushy about it, but thoughtful and kind person. Yeah, the business stuff is just in our current construct the way to buy freedom. Many of the businesses are super interesting to me, and I'm somewhat passionate about some of them, and not so passionate about the others, and really passionate about some. So I don't have a desire that I built X or AWS or Amazon, and that was my lasting legacy. I just hope that if I had interactions with people, they would think I was thoughtful and kind and in some way enrich their lives. I don't see it like if I build this huge thing and that was my legacy. I don't look at it that way.
Yeah. It's more the human aspect of who you are as a person. I think that's what, when we talk about authenticity and um, genuineness and vulnerability and all the wonderful things that Brene Brown and others talk about. I think for me, most of authenticity, or really all of authenticity, is just being who you are and being comfortable with who you are. And I think you impact. That's one of the things I really admire about you, Arthur, is that you do impact people, but in a way that's only you. It's truly who you are.
I appreciate that. And how hasn't always been that way. By the way, for the record, on this recording, I've been a bad dad. I've screwed people out of stuff. I have not made all the right decisions. I've done bad things in my life, right? Not necessarily with intent, just circumstantial, right? And that's not my excuse. I'm just saying I could have done better on a lot of things, right? But, I think the hazard is not learning from those things.
Yeah, it is. I really believe that's true, that everything in our lives, whether we look back and think, wow, I would not do that again, or I would do that totally differently. I think there's so much value in staying in the lesson. It's one of the things I talked to my son about. He's 29. He's a fighter pilot. And, when you're in the government structure, you're kind of in a structure. And he's very entrepreneurial, very, very creative. And I told him, I said, don't miss the moment, the opportunity that you have now to learn the lessons from the environment that you're in.
Good advice.
I,
Very,
I hope he's taking it in. But I believe they're lessons that he will go on to use with his own son. They have a little boy, I have a grandson, a year and a half.
yeah, great.
And they are. It's the story of your life, just like what you were saying about the story of your life with your dad and watching your dad go through his struggles and how that shifted his life.
Yeah, totally. Had he done a little bit more self work, again, I'm not blaming him. It is what it is, but he probably would have bounced back better from that had he done a little bit of more what we talk about, right? Um, I think we talked about this before, but Joseph Campbell, one liner, life is full of sorrow, embrace it, right? Wow.
Yeah. Or even his work on the hero's journey, knowing that everybody has a hero's journey. We all do. The color of the journey looks different. Maybe the duration of the journey looks different, but every one of us has a hero's journey where you get to a point and you have that breakthrough if you keep going. Like for you, Arthur, you didn't quit when things weren't going the way that you wanted them to go, life was tough, you had kids to support, you didn't quit.
Yes, so give me kudos for that, but I also didn't have a choice, right? I had to do something. I could have gone and got a job. Yes, that I didn't didn't submit to, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you stayed in the rigor. When I was raising my son, I raised him as a single mom, and I deliberately decided that my life was going to be providing for us and providing for him and putting him in schools where he was able to speak freely and to think critically so for him, that environment was the right environment for him to put him in private schools. I'm not saying that's right for everybody, but you have to know yourself and you have to know your children and what you're willing to do to get through. How far are you willing to go? For me, that's, where we talked about the book Anti-Fragile. That's where we have that inner fortitude, resilience, become anti-fragile to life. And it's like the cedar tree. The cedar tree can really bend, or the palm tree can really bend in high wind, but it comes right back up. And I think that's a beautiful example.
Do you think, I'm sorry to interrupt, do you think that based on at the time that you did that, there were, in my view, if I got the time frame right, putting your child in the right school so they could have, proper education and think for themselves, is that opportunity, if you were bringing up kids today, better, worse, the same?
I always believed in putting him in the school that was right for him. So I only have one son. I believed in putting him in the right school for him. There were plenty of kids that went to the public schools that did really well. For me, I needed that extra support system of a school that I knew had similar beliefs and values that I was trying to reinforce at home. So not only was the academic rigor much greater in the school that he was in, like when he went to college, yeah, it was a breeze for him because of the work that he did in high school, but it was so much more than just the academics. It was his ability to formulate an opinion, a point of view, independent from me. I mean, if he had a difference of opinion, that was totally okay in our home. So, would I do it again today? Would I put him in that school today? Absolutely. In fact, he's talking about putting his son, moving back to the DC area to make sure that his son gets to go to that school.
Nice, nice.
So, yeah, so I know it had a positive impact. But yeah, we have, as parents, it's a test and learn a lot of times, isn't it?
Totally. Sometimes you just don't know.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, I have enjoyed speaking with you and getting to know you a little bit better, Arthur. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you would love to share?
No, but I really appreciate you doing this. Some people are uncomfortable talking about themselves, and I think that I'm just telling you the way it is, right? It's not, I don't have any secrets to speak of, and I think that when I sit in a room or on this call with you, there's an energy that's unmistakable. And I think that part of what you're reading from me is that I can recognize other people that can read that energy. So, when you're saying I'm being authentic, I don't have any other way of doing it.
Right.
There was a time where I was not authentic because I thought I had to be something else, right? And so maybe I graduated, maybe I evolved, whatever it is, but I don't know any other way to be. And I think when you and I walk into a room and we step up to somebody, there's you can feel the energy. And the more you do that and your radar's open for that, the more accurate it gets.
Absolutely. A friend of mine put it this way. He said, the better you know yourself, the better you can see through people. And it's not seeing through them in a bad way, but it's like a next level ability to understand people, who they are, and are their words in harmony with their actions and who they say they are. I think when you're sensitive to that energy, you can pick that up if it's not congruent.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's a good radar.
Yeah, it is. It
It's like
is.
muscle, though, the more you use it, the better it gets, right? Just like intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody asked me, they said, how do you know the difference between the voice of intuition and the voice of fear? Well, the voice of fear is generally very loud. This is the way I look at it. The voice of intuition And it goes along with what you just said. The more you listen to your intuition and yield to that soft voice, it's a softer voice. It's like when my son calls, he doesn't have to say, Mom, it's David. I know, I know his voice. So understanding what the voice of intuition feels like and how it speaks to you is really, it's a skill that you can build over time.
and super valuable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one closing question. This is a big question.
Okay.
Super Bowl Sunday, Patriots or Seahawks?
Seahawks.
Awesome. I love it.
It's because I know something. Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
wait a second. Should I have my money on the Seahawks then?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. So if you lose it all, don't call me. But so you haven't met Mary, but Mary is, well, not Mary, but she might as well be my wife, is a Brooklyn girl. And she is athletic trainer by profession and doesn't do that anymore because it's a terrible way to, the person that runs out on the field when somebody gets hurt, terrible way to make a living. But she's super good trainer for me when we go to the gym, and also physically fit and looks fantastic. But she is the big football fan in our house. I mean, I was only interested because I could go to football games and entertain people and have fun. I wasn't really a big fan. So I've become a big fan. So she says Seahawks, it's Seahawks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that she has a little bit of an inside eye for that. So I just hope it's a good game.
Me too. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
absolutely. Arthur, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and look
I
forward
appreciate
to
you.
chatting with you again soon.
Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Bye
Okay.
for now.
Bye.